Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan, and this week I welcome Ben Airth to the podcast. Ben worked for the California Center for Sustainable Energy for over 18 years. He served as a board member of the California Solar Energy Industries Association, CalSIA. He is currently the policy director at Freedom Forever, a solar company that is working in 30 states across the nation, as well as Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ted. I appreciate that. Thanks for the kind introductions, and really glad to be here to talk to you about solar sustainability and all things that you cover.
Well, thanks for taking the time to do so. And I take it you're in San Diego right now as we speak.
Yes, that is true. That is
Wh-
true. And
Which is home for you. Were you born and raised there? I think you were.
no, I'm a native Californian. I was born in the Bay Area.
Mhm.
Lived there until my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, we decided to move in our young 20s. But we've been in San Diego ever since. So, but I've only known California.
Nice place to be. Nice place to be.
Yeah.
So I always start off. What are you working on today? I introduce you as working for Freedom Forever. What's hot today?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And today actually happens to be the day that I brief our management on just what is going on in the policy world in the states and regions that we work in. And a lot of those things are down at the regulatory level, at the legislative level, and then of course tracking what's going on at the federal level, because that has been a key moment in the life cycle of the solar industry, just because of all the changes that we've seen. But yeah, I'm really focused this week specifically on figuring out a couple things that are going on in Texas.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and figuring out how Freedom is going to launch our virtual power plant option or program, and several other things. Reading through legislation, talking about a piece of legislation that's going on in New Jersey that could be a real good boon for the industry, but also the grid in New Jersey. So yeah, there's just
You
several
got lots
things
going on. Well, let's unpack that. You hit on a
Yeah.
lot of the topics that I really wanted to get into. You're primarily a residential solar company, I presume, from your website.
Yeah.
And how, and in general, how is your company done? I mean, obviously we had the fall off of the residential investment tax credit at the end of last year. What's the tenor? How are you guys surviving? How are you shifting to make up for that 30% loss of value for consumers?
Yeah, I don't think we have a unique story to really tell, unlike others. The only thing that really makes us a little bit different is our size, right? We were the largest and still are the largest residential solar installer who employ the boots on the roof, right? The folks that get up in the morning and go install these systems. But we were the largest, really, 25D contractor in the country up until the end of the year. And so with the loss of the 25D has been, I think for everybody, including us, just a bump in the road. How do we continue to offer the same value to customers who want to purchase their system outright? Whether they get a loan or we offer them a loan or not, but they get homeowner or ownership of that system without that 30%. So essentially, systems for people who want to buy them outright are 30% more, which you can imagine is causing a lot of pause on people purchasing systems. So that is one of our biggest challenges right now, but we are answering that through it's not a new product. It's been around for a while, but it's really picking up steam now. But the prepaid lease, it's basically a hybrid of a loan or cash system with a TPO that can amortize the continued 48E tax credit, and it also offers the pathway to ownership of the system after a certain number of years.
So let me just, for some of our listeners that are not as familiar
Yeah.
with the tax code, it's my understanding that the prepaid lease that you're basically, you as a solar company are helping the consumers take advantage of the commercial tax credit that is still available, right?
That is 100% correct. And the tax credits, the naming conventions of these tax credits are a little confusing. The commercial tax credit simply means that a commercial entity who owns the system, whether it's on a commercial building or a residential, home, uh, is eligible for that. But the
Yeah.
benefits of that still can get passed down to the homeowner.
And by prepaying, they're essentially going through the same in terms of raising cash for your solar system there. Yeah, they used to just buy it themselves and pick up the tax credit. Now they're prepaying all of the lease payments, and then they're getting the discount of the owner of that system for, I guess, the first at least 6 years. The
That's
owner
right.
of that system is collecting that tax credit. So instead of getting the 30%, is it fair to say they get around a 20% discount in that model?
It's actually 30% or more,
Ah,
because it
the bonus
depends
the
on.
bonus tax credits, I guess,
Exactly, the
coming into play.
bonus tax credits. But the goal was always to match at minimum what they were previously getting with the residential tax credit. So that
So that's
25B
great.
tax
It's
credit.
great news, I think. I mean, I've heard this from other solar companies here in California that the sky is not falling. There is this other financial mechanism that's viable, and I guess the commercial tax credit is viable for what, another 3 or 4 years? Is that currently
It
the
is it is gonna be around until I gotta I would have to go back and look, but it's 2027, either July 4th or the end of 2027. I can't remember what date of that is. But so the change from the legislation, the federal legislation, was we're going to remove the 10 years. We're only going to scale back to 2027 for the 48E, which is the commercial tax credit, get rid of it for the residential tax credit. But in there is the strategy for safe harboring. And this is it's very unique, somewhat difficult to explain, but basically, if you're able to, um, quote unquote, begin construction, and
Yeah,
there's a couple ways you could do that, you could actually have a 4-year glide path
yeah,
post that 2027 date.
right, and I guess you safe harbor by purchasing something like 5% of the equipment,
That's right.
up front, and that gives you that longer
That's right.
period to actually complete the construction. Now we're really in the weeds here, but while we're
We
at
we are.
it, while
Yeah.
we're at it, is there a difference between a prepaid PPA and a prepaid lease? I know with a PPA, traditionally you're paying for kilowatt hours, and the lease you're paying a monthly payment. But
Yep.
are those handled the same way in terms of the tax code? Do you know?
They are exactly the same as far as the tax code, because your traditional PPA or lease, which is 20, 25 years, no path to ownership, um, which has been the model in the third party ownership, finance realm. Um, they both get 48E
Okay,
and all the bonus credits. Yeah.
good, good.
Where there may be differences outside of what you actually pay for, um, may maybe in on a state level or something like that. But I'm really not sure. I don't really think there is much difference.
Yeah, yeah. Now let's come back to the good state of California, the Golden State,
Of course.
California, because we not only had the drop off of the residential investment tax credit, but we also shifted into this thing called net billing. And I
Yeah.
think most of my listeners, we've done various podcasts on this, will understand what net energy metering is. When we went through a situation in California where we started off giving people 100% of the retail credit or 100%
Yep.
of the retail value of the kilowatt hours that they sent back to the grid when they weren't home or when they're at work, or for a lot of the schools that we work with in the summer, they're getting 100% of the value as a credit. And then we had net billing 2.0, I call it, that I kind of racked that back to about 85% of the value of the retail value. And now with net billing, it's dramatically different, right? It's I don't even know. I don't even can't put a percentage because I think at every hour of the year, you get a value for every hour of the year. And some hours of the year, you're getting like 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And and other hours, a few hours in September or October, I think it was, you're getting like $2 a kilowatt hour. Very complicated, but overall, a really big blow to the residential solar market and to the commercial solar market here in California, right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, just anytime there's a change, you're always going to see a hiccup. When you make a significant change like that, and now that we've had some time to really figure this out, um, maybe there's a revisionist history to it where it
Hmm.
maybe wasn't the worst thing at all, because now we have batteries that are able to
Yeah.
ensure the self-consumption, or behind the meter value. um, but it was painful because it was drastic. And what this industry is not a, is always harmed by is when you have a cliff. And we've had cliffs in the NEM 1 to NEM 2. um, that's why we needed to figure out NEM 2, NEM 2 to NEM 3. Anytime you have that cliff, it just takes time, especially when you know what that solution is going to be, right? In this case, it was
Mhm.
batteries.
Yeah.
The problem was that batteries, then, and I really don't have any data on how much the cost of batteries have gone down, but let's just say back then it was you know $15,000 to add a battery. You
Right.
basically took a system that you could have gotten for 15,000, you doubled the price.
Yeah.
So a solar system, you double the price. That that's painful for everybody, because now you have a um, your payback is increased. Your economics are just different.
Yeah.
But we're getting to the point where batteries, since they're being used, and just the economics of of well, just the economics, you're reducing the cost of that battery, just like we saw from solar. From 2010 to 2015, maybe a little bit before that, we saw the cost of solar panels drop 70%.
Yeah.
We're seeing the same thing happen here. So looking back, yes, that was painful, but it was perhaps the thing that we needed to do. The only thing that I think the industry would have asked the commission to do over again was give us a glide path. But
Yeah.
instead, they said, well, you got to feel the pain real quick before, so you can hurry up and get the batteries.
So let's see if we can explain in simple terms how the batteries work for consumers. I think what happens is you store your solar power in your battery, and
Yep.
then instead of sending your excess back to the grid, you're storing it in your battery, and then you're discharging it, ideally at the peak period, right? But you're back to getting that full retail value, right? Because instead of having to buy power from the grid at a certain point, you've got that in your battery, right? Is that a fair characterization of how the
Yeah, no,
self-consumption works?
that's exactly right. And with the time of use rates that customers are on, it's in all utility territories, in the IOU territories, that is the signal of when to charge and discharge.
Yeah,
The idea is to use that solar in the non-peak periods, but when the cost of electricity gets to 80 cents a kilowatt hour, well, don't let's use all that power in that battery to offset that.
yeah,
And again, it's really just a math equation. If the export rates, as you mentioned, in September and August and September, were higher than that, then maybe you put the kilowatt hours into the grid and you get more value than what you could have got for the 80 cents. Or maybe you do both, right? I think there's a
right.
there's a there's a world where you can see that. But yeah, it's a simple if and question. If this is more expensive than that, then do this.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit nationally because, like you said, I'm impressed that you were the largest a residential solar installation company in the country. That's fantastic. And you work in 32 states plus or 30 states plus Puerto Rico and DC. What's the difference between those states? Do most of those states have net billing, or do some of them not have net billing at this point?
Yeah, it's kind of scattered. I think the early adopters had a NEM of some sort. And really, NEM is one thing, but having your simple rate that a customer would go on, that was, let's just say, the same cost across every hour of the day. Um, then they would move to a time of use period, and they do all these different things. But the one thing that I think is constant is where states, and even in different utility within states,
Right.
have a
Yeah.
nascent market, you're typically going to see NEM continuing, right?
Yeah.
Because they just haven't seen what they perceive to be this cost shift or the penetration of rooftop solar that is affecting the grid to the point where they have massive amounts of daytime solar that's being put into the grid, which we saw in California, and that was one of the main reasons why California needed to change away from your traditional NEM and move to time of use. So just incentivize customers to use energy at different times.
Yeah.
But the problem that we have seen is in some of these nascent markets, they saw what California did and they tried to mimic that prematurely. And by
Yeah.
doing so, you really harm the market to the point where you're unable to provide this equivalent savings that you would have otherwise. Case in point, and we have not been in this state in 3 years or so, but Idaho, it really was a good market. It was a small market, of course, right? Not a huge population, but their commission bought into what the utility was saying, and they changed everything, um, including and most specifically adding fixed charges that were so detrimental that solar
Yeah.
just didn't work anymore. Those are the markets that are really tough, where they're using precedents of other states, again, like California and even Illinois, where you saw heavy penetration. Um, but they made these changes prematurely that really, really undercut the market.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah. Well, I don't know if it's a fair question. What are the most attractive states for solar? Like, if our listeners are, what states is solar the best deal right now? Residential solar the best deal right now?
Great question. And it's for different reasons.
Yeah.
California, I think, will always continue to be the most beneficial state for solar. Uh, and I'll just say because electric rates are so high,
Yeah.
simply. Um, Illinois is a really, really good state because they have RECs. They have their incentive program. So their value stack in Illinois is I don't like to use the word lucrative because it sounds like, oh, everyone's just making a ton of money, but it's lucrative in the way that it gives a lot of value to the customer at the end of the day.
Right.
They have the REC program. So Illinois Shines program gives an upfront incentive to residential systems based on the long-term value of those renewable energy credits. And that is great because the RECs provide this middle ground where the utility and the customers can come together and agree on one thing, which is providing this clean power that we're producing to the utility for a rate that they would have otherwise paid more for, buying from fossil fuels or whatever. So a rec market is really good because it doesn't create the animosity that we've seen in some states between the utility and the solar industry. And also, very clever now that I really think about it, but they got rid of their NEM program. But what they did is they said, we're going to give you a $300 incentive per kW and kilowatt hour of battery. But it is that long-term NEM value, we're going to give it to you up front.
Hmm.
Right. And so you have that, they call it the DG rebate. And then you have the RECs, and then you have self-consumption. So whatever the customer can offset behind their own meter. And what we're going to see in the near future is virtual power plant programs, which is going to even provide another value stack. But that market is just a very symbiotic
Yeah.
between relationship between the industry and the utilities, that is making it very, very just good to do business in. And the other one I'll say, and there are others, but Puerto Rico is a great place. And I think it's obvious why Puerto Rico is such a good market. And I always say, if there was a way to only do batteries, people would just do batteries. Solar
Yeah.
is kind of the necessary afterthought because you need the power from the sun, and but the batteries is what the consumer wants because of the way that the grid is always failing, and obviously with hurricanes and so forth. So those three markets are arguably the best. There are other
Interesting.
markets that are very good as well.
Yeah.
I'll say Maine is not an obvious one, but it's a pretty good market.
Interesting. Well, let me ask you, thank you for taking us around the country and sort of
Yeah.
explaining a few of these value stacks as you describe them, the benefits to the consumers to move. So as I was looking at your website and I saw 30 states plus Puerto Rico and DC, I thought, well, what about the other 20 states? Is there a reason why you're not in those other states?
Yeah. There's a reason why we've never been in states, and there's a reason why we have closed down in some states, unfortunately. And it starts with the regulatory environment. I mentioned Idaho. Utah is very similar because the regulators got rid of NEM, did not replace it with anything that provides a commensurate amount of value. Um, and then, which is really the death knell of solar, is fixed charges. When you start adding fixed charges,
Yeah.
you can't offset those, and the higher that they go, really in relation to what the value of that kilowatt hour export or whatever, even if you had a battery, it just reduces the overall payback return on investment that you're going to offer a customer.
And I
Um,
think we Californians owe you a thanks for fighting against fixed charges in the California
Yeah.
regulations. Yeah.
No, and thank you to, CALSA for
Yeah.
their work and obviously their members,
Yeah.
because yes, and that's another kind of clue to how good a market is how good that their association is, their
Yeah.
solar association. We obviously have SIA, who's doing a ton of fighting on the federal level. They do state work as well, but those states that have solar associations, whether they're arguing for utility scale or not, um, those are going to be some of the best ones because that you have people to push back.
Yeah, and we've had Bernadette Del Chiaro on the podcast, and EcoMotion. We're a CALSA member, and Brad Heavner is just terrific.
Oh yeah, great.
Good
They're
stuff.
great.
Let's shift to virtual power plants, which you alluded to earlier, both in your
Yeah.
introductory remarks and then also in this sort of value stack. And I'm a huge advocate of virtual power plants. And instead of having just these large utility-owned power plants, if us consumers can have our own batteries here on site and we carve out some of that for our own resilience, but we also make some of that capacity available when the utility hits a peak period, it seems like such a win-win and a way to drive down that first cost or that life cycle cost, I guess it really is, of battery ownership, right?
It is because of everything that you just mentioned, and it similar to the idea of the RECs in Illinois, it creates this middle ground where everybody is benefiting, including the grid and including the ratepayers and the utilities. Um, they may never say that the shareholders are benefiting, but the truth is, it is such a win-win. And it kind of leads me to the one state that I forgot to mention in your last question about the best states, and that is really Texas. I would say, and I'm kind of kicking myself for forgetting it, but this was a great segue into talking about Texas because
Yeah.
um, what we presumed just a number of years ago, shortly after Winter Storm Uri, was their detriment, is now actually their real benefit, and that is their deregulated market. Um, the deregulated market, so ERCOT in Texas, allows for those same reps, retail energy providers, to provide more value to customers through the guise of virtual power plants, solar, simply that is solar and batteries that are installed on your roof. Um, and it allows those reps to actually create a model around clean energy, around distributed energy, instead of the centralized um, model that we see almost everywhere else. And there's the Wild West of Texas energy has really allowed for innovation and creativity to really expand. In case in point is um, When you look at San Antonio and CPS, and when you look at Austin Energy and those two municipal utility areas, they're not as creative, and the creativity has to be born from inside them in order to match
Mm.
whether it's VPPs or just expanding and pushing their customers to install solar. Um, and that, again, that traditional model is being outpaced in Texas because of everything that can be offered there. Um, and the other thing I have to give a shout out to Texas last year signed legislation to allow for third party permitting. So you can have a qualified third party actually do your permit review instead of the city or the county,
Mm.
and your inspection. And now we're seeing systems that we're installing, we're going from sale to install within a week because the third party reviewer who we have a direct contract with, it's in their best interest to turn these
To
things
move
around
it
as soon as
fast.
possible.
It's been one of the bottlenecks, and we hear from
Exactly.
countries like Australia that, like you're saying, it can be a couple weeks instead of months
Yep.
of frustrating delay. Ben, let's kind of segue towards vehicle grid integration. I'm excited about, I'm sitting here, my wife and I, we each have an EV. They're just sitting there right now. We have 100 and over 100 and about 130 kilowatt hours of energy sitting in our batteries there. Uh, if we had a power wall, it would be what, 13 and a half kilowatt hours.
Yep.
Uh, do you see that vehicle grid integration coming down the pike, no pun intended, pretty fast, or is it going to be 5, 10 years out? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And admittedly, I'm probably not the best person to ask this question to because I have not really been paying attention to that because of just solar and battery policy.
Yeah.
But when I worked at my previous job, I left there in 2022. I worked at a nonprofit, the Center for Sustainable Energy. We were here in San Diego. They worked a lot on EVs, vehicle to grid, and they were kind of at the forefront on a nonprofit level, working with cities and states to do different projects and testing things and whatnot. But the one point I will make is I think we all want to see vehicle to grid. I would just I would think that with what came out of the one big beautiful bill is going to be an inhibitor, just like it has been to solar and storage,
Yeah.
to getting us to the point of vehicle to grid integration, to the point where companies like ours can really start to offer something because we're already installing the battery. We do install chargers,
Yeah.
but we don't really have a solution for the customer when they say, "Hey, how can I use my car as a power plant?" Right?
Right.
Um, it's there's still a lot more work to do, at least to get us really engaged in that.
Yeah, I think the big beautiful bill is just retarded at it, because I think you would agree that the logic is that we want to integrate our electric mobility with our electric grid,
Yeah.
and just from a resilience standpoint, I know the Franklin Whole Energy battery system is now integrated can be integrated with EVs as long as you have a bidirectional charger. But
Mm.
I just love the notion of going off on vacation, right? And you drive your EV to the airport and you plug it in and it's actually making money for you because there's
It's
all sorts
working.
of, yeah, it's working. Yeah, what is it? It's got a day job, I guess that's the term,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Uh, but I know there's all sorts of issues, and it gets into battery warranties and whether you're voiding the warranty and everything. But it seems like that's going to happen at some point, and certainly with school buses, which have about 150 kWh on board, and municipal buses. We've worked for LA Metro for years. More like 300 kilowatt hours on board. It's pretty exciting, right?
Yeah, and the the one entity that is in the middle of making this happen truly is the utility as well. We
Yeah,
need tariffs and rates to
right.
be sized properly to allow for this to happen. Some of the arguments here in California that I heard for not doing this is some of the same arguments we heard with solar, which is the cost shift, which is even some of the technical challenges of overloading a circuit or whatever the case may be, and those seem to be solvable solutions. But when you introduce the idea of the cost shift, I think you're introducing a mindset versus you know a technical solution or something that can be solved by working together. It's tough to overcome mindsets, and we see that, and we've seen it. We continue to see that with investor-owned utilities.
Well, I so many things I want to talk to you. We're pretty much out of time, but let's hit on this cost shift because I'm very much with you. I think it's a mind shift. I mean, I am a big believer in distributed generation and going from this, centralized generation model to distributed generation, a lot of resilience in the system. I think it's so admirable that people like myself and all my neighbors that have gone solar have actually invested in utility infrastructure, right?
We have, yeah.
Um, and now the utilities are saying, well, you're placing this burden on other people. And like you said, Ben, it's largely because we don't have the right tariffs in place, I think.
Yeah, it's largely because we don't have the right tariffs in place, but I do think it goes back to that mindset. And you make a great point, and I think we even the advocates fail to really play this point up. But the investment, if you just calculated all the investment that homeowners made for all the rooftop systems and businesses for
Yeah.
all those rooftop systems, that is probably gonna. I can't even venture to guess, but the real question or point is how much investment wasn't made by the utility
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
deliver power.
Yeah.
And when we can start integrating more virtual power plants, and when I think of California's virtual power plant policies, they're bad and almost non-existent. They could do so much better.
Yeah.
Um, and CCAs are trying to do that, but we need a cohesive one. But the point is, what other, I don't know, industry or market do we get people investing their own money to give a public resource?
Right. Right. And the key is to find ways that can continue and
Yeah.
that the utilities really benefit as opposed to resist. Uh,
Yeah, and again, I think it's just going to be a mindset because they keep saying, well, the shareholders aren't making their fair share. Well, what if you stop saying that and actually proved that DG and with VPPs and all in vehicle to grid actually worked? Would they stop making their fair share? Like, anyways, that's the
yeah.
mindset part of this, right?
Yeah. Very good. Hey, thanks so much for being on the podcast, Ben.
Of course, this is great. I love it, Tim. Thank you
Great
very much for having
discussion.
me.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's Ecologic. We'll see you next time.